After 9 years of sacrificing my education to care for my sick mother and support my family, everything I thought I was doing for love and loyalty came crashing down. I overheard my younger brother, Tom, call me a loser at his graduation party. In that moment, I realized that maybe I'd lost more than just time, I'd lost my sense of self. And for the first time, I chose myself and walked away from it all. My name is Lisa, and I'm 29 years old. For years, I've been grappling with a difficult family situation that started nearly a decade ago when I was a 20-year-old sophomore in college, bright-eyed and full of ambition. I had big dreams of becoming a clinical psychologist, inspired by the therapist who helped me through my father's death when I was just a child. My life was on track. I was excelling in my psychology classes, had a tight-knit group of friends, and was even planning to study abroad the next year. But then everything changed. It was around this time that my mother, Sandra, was diagnosed with a severe autoimmune disorder. She was only 52, but the illness attacked her joints and muscles, leaving her in constant pain and with severely limited mobility. Her illness was progressive, and while treatable, there was no cure. It turned our lives upside down. At the time, my younger brother Tom was just 15, a moody and rebellious teenager more interested in video games and hanging out with friends than in family responsibilities. He was still in high school, and I knew that with our father gone killed in a car accident when Tom was still a baby, there was no one else to lean on. It had always been the three of us, and with Mom unable to work, it fell on me to hold things together. The day I decided to drop out of college is etched in my mind as vividly as if it happened yesterday. I was sitting in my dorm room, surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, and I realized that my dreams would have to be put on hold. It wasn't an easy choice. I could feel my future slipping away as I made the decision, but at the time, it felt like there was no alternative. My mother needed round-the-clock care, and our family needed financial support. Tom was still too young to take on any of that responsibility. I remember walking into the registrar's office, fighting back tears as I filled out the withdrawal paperwork. The advisor tried to persuade me to stay, suggesting part-time classes or a leave of absence. But I knew it wouldn't be enough. We needed money, and I needed to be home. So at just 20 years old, I entered the workforce full-time, leaving behind my dreams of becoming a psychologist. My first job was as a receptionist at a small accounting firm. The pay was minimal, barely enough to make ends meet, but it was something. I moved back home to save on rent and to be there for Mom and Tom. Those first few months were a blur of exhaustion and responsibility. I went from engaging in college lectures and lively discussions with friends to answering phones and filing paperwork for a paycheck. In the evenings, I helped Mom with her physical therapy, prepared meals, and tried to keep Tom on track with his homework. The contrast between my life and that of my friends was staggering. While they were thriving in college, talking about study abroad programs and internships, I was juggling household responsibilities and full-time work. My world had shrunk down to Mom's illness, Tom's education, and keeping the household afloat. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made the right decision. But every time I questioned myself, I reminded myself that this was temporary. I would get back to school. I just needed to help my family first. The years passed, and I managed to work my way up from receptionist to administrative assistant. The pay improved slightly, enough to cover the bills and Mom's ever-growing medical expenses. I made sure Tom had everything he needed for school, from clothes to field trips, so he wouldn't miss out on any opportunities. I felt proud in a way, knowing that I was helping him have a better life, even if it meant putting mine on hold. Tom finished high school and, with the help of scholarships and financial aid, went off to college. I was overjoyed when he got his acceptance letter. I cried tears of happiness, proud that at least one of us would get a degree. That moment felt like a victory, proof that all the sacrifices I'd made were paying off. I treated him to ice cream, just like our parents used to do when we were kids, and promised him that I'd always be there to support him. But while Tom was away at college, things started to change. He stopped calling as often, and when he did, it was usually to ask for money or help with something. His social media was full of pictures from parties and spring break trips, things I couldn't afford, not even close. Whenever he came home for holidays, he spent most of his time with friends, barely acknowledging Mom and me. I chalked it up to him being a typical college student, but it hurt. The real breaking point came during Tom's college graduation. I had been saving up for months to buy him a special gift, a watch that he could wear to job interviews. It wasn't expensive, but it was good quality, and I thought it was a meaningful way to show him how proud I was. I remembered how much it meant to me when Dad gave me a watch for my 16th birthday, and I wanted to pass on that tradition to Tom. The graduation ceremony itself was lovely, and I couldn't help but tear up as I watched my little brother walk across the stage to receive his diploma. But the celebration afterward was a different story. Tom spent the entire time with his college friends and his new girlfriend, Megan, a polished and stylish woman who barely acknowledged me or Mom. I tried to give Tom his gift, but he brushed me off, saying he was too busy. I stood there, holding the wrapped box, feeling small and out of place. Mom didn't seem to notice. She was too busy telling everyone about Tom's bright future and how he was going to take care of us. That's when I overheard Tom talking to Megan and his friends. He called me a loser and said he couldn't wait to leave us behind. He told them how embarrassed he was by his family and how he was planning to cut off contact once he moved away. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. All the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd given up, the nights I'd spent worrying about him, it all felt worthless in that moment. I confronted Tom the next day. I told him I heard everything he'd said. Instead of apologizing, he lashed out at me, saying he never asked me to give up my life for Mom. He accused me of being jealous of his success. And then, as if to twist the knife even further, Mom took his side. She told me I was being dramatic and that I should leave Tom alone. She said I should be proud of him, not trying to ruin his big day. In that moment, something inside me broke. For years, I had been the one holding everything together. And now, both my brother and my mother were telling me I wasn't enough, that I was pathetic for caring, for trying. The weight of it, all the sacrifices, the unspoken resentment, the years of self-denial came crashing down on me. I began to question everything. Had I wasted the last 9 years of my life? Had I made a huge mistake in sacrificing my education and my future for a family that didn't seem to appreciate me? Should I have been more selfish, focused on my own dreams instead of giving everything to them? In the days that followed, I found myself daydreaming about what my life could have been if I'd stayed in college. Would I be a psychologist now, helping others work through their problems? Would I have traveled, made new friends, fallen in love? Instead, here I was, 29 years old, with no degree, stuck in a dead-end job, caring for a mother who barely acknowledged my sacrifices and a brother who was ashamed of me. I started to wonder if it was time to finally put myself first. Maybe it was time to leave, to pack up and start over somewhere new, where I could focus on myself for a change. But guilt tugged at me. What if Mom's condition got worse? What if she needed me? And yet, why should I keep sacrificing my life for people who didn't seem to value me? I didn't know what to do. I felt lost, torn between my duty to my family and the desire to live my own life. It was a crossroads, and I had no idea which path to take. After Tom reluctantly agreed to have dinner, I spent the entire day preparing. I wanted to create a comforting environment, something that might soften the conversation I knew we had to have. I scrubbed the house, top to bottom, meticulously cleaned every corner of the kitchen, the dining area, and the living room. It wasn't just about the cleanliness. This was a symbolic act, a final attempt to restore the semblance of family, even if deep down I knew this dinner would change everything. I cooked Mom's favorite lasagna recipe, the one I hadn't made in months. It used to be a family staple before things became too difficult, before I was too exhausted from work and caregiving to prepare meals like I used to. I remembered how Mom would smile when I made it, a rare look of contentment on her face. I clung to that memory, hoping it might return. When we all finally sat down at the dinner table, the tension was palpable. Tom arrived late, as usual, looking irritated from the moment he walked in. Mom sat quietly, her eyes occasionally darting toward him, as if anticipating what mood he would bring to the table. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for the right words to begin. I had rehearsed this conversation in my head 100 times, each version slightly different, but all leading to the same outcome, an acknowledgement of the sacrifices I had made, and a hope, however fragile, that my family would appreciate those sacrifices. As I spoke, I tried to stay calm, but my voice trembled. I laid it all out for them, piece by piece, recounting the sacrifices that had become so deeply ingrained in my daily life that I barely recognized them as sacrifices anymore. Dropping out of college was the biggest, but it was far from the only thing I gave up. I talked about the vacations I never took, the friendships I lost touch with, and the relationships that never had a chance to bloom. I wasn't just a caretaker for Mom, I had been for Tom as well. I reminded him of how I'd helped him with homework, made sure he had new clothes when he went off to college, and covered expenses that Mom couldn't afford because of her medical bills. As I spoke, I watched their reactions carefully, looking for any sign of recognition or understanding. But instead of gratitude or acknowledgement, I was met with cold indifference. Mom was the first to speak, and her words cut deeper than I had anticipated. She immediately became defensive, as though I was attacking her for being sick. "I didn't ask you to drop out of college, Lisa," she said, her voice sharp. "That was your choice. Do you think I wanted to get sick? Do you think I wanted this life?" I was stunned by her response. I had expected some resistance, but I wasn't prepared for this level of deflection. I wasn't blaming her for her illness, and I tried to make that clear, but she wouldn't listen. She brought up how her own mother had taken care of her father for years without a word of complaint, implying that I should have done the same without asking for anything in return. Every time I tried to explain that I wasn't blaming her, that I just wanted some acknowledgement, she cut me off with defensive retorts. It was as though she saw any expression of my pain as an attack on her. I turned to Tom, hoping for a different response, but he barely said a word. He sat there, expressionless, pushing his lasagna around his plate, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. When I mentioned the cruel things I'd overheard him saying at his graduation party, he didn't deny it. Instead, he shrugged, barely looking up from his plate. "Well, it's true, isn't it? You are kind of a loser." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I had never expected him to be so blunt, so heartless. All the years I had spent supporting him, taking care of him, seemed to vanish in that moment. I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I tried to keep them at bay. I asked him how he could say something so cruel after everything I had done for him, hoping he might realize the gravity of his words. But instead, he rolled his eyes and muttered, "Here we go with the guilt trip again." I looked to Mom for support, for anything that might soften the blow of Tom's words. but she remained silent, only glancing at me with an exasperated look, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "He didn't mean it like that," she said, dismissing his cruelty as if it were nothing more than a careless joke. But I saw the way Tom's face twisted when he said those words. He meant every bit of it. Tom started listing off his accomplishments, his degree, his new job offer, his plans to move to the city. And then he looked me dead in the eye. "What have you done with your life?" he asked, his voice cold. "You're almost 30, still living at home, working as a secretary." That was the breaking point. I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. Between sobs, I reminded Tom of all the things I had done for him over the years, driving him to sports practice, helping him with school projects, making sure he had everything he needed for college. I asked him if any of that mattered to him, but instead of responding, Tom stood up from the table and said, "I'm done with this toxic family drama. I'm moving out next week, and maybe it's better if we don't talk for a while." He left, his plate of untouched lasagna still sitting on the table, and with that, something inside me broke. Once Tom was gone, Mom turned on me. "You're selfish," she spat, her voice filled with venom. "You've made this whole thing about you when I'm the one who's been suffering all these years. You've done nothing but turn Tom against me. If you're so unhappy, maybe you should just leave too." Her words echoed in my mind as I grabbed my things and left the house in tears. I spent that night at Kelly's place, my best friend since high school. Kelly had always been a rock for me, the one person who never judged or questioned me, even when I canceled plans last minute to take care of family obligations. That night, she listened to me as I cried and vented for hours, providing a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. The next day, I returned home to pack some of my belongings. I had made up my mind I was leaving. Kelly had offered me a place to stay temporarily, and I knew I needed to take it. As I packed, Mom realized what I was doing and panicked. She cried, pleaded, and guilt-tripped me, saying she didn't know how she would survive without me. She even brought up Dad, telling me that he would be disappointed in me for abandoning the family. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt. I almost caved in and considered staying. But then Mom started in again, calling me ungrateful for all she'd done for me, for raising me on her own. That was the final straw. I told her I was leaving, and that she would need to figure out other arrangements. I suggested looking into home health aides or asking her sister for help, but she rejected those options, saying she could never trust anyone to care for her like I did. But I realized, for the first time, that it wasn't my problem to solve anymore. Packing up my room felt surreal. I came across my old psychology textbooks, the ones I had clung to, thinking I might return to school one day. I found photo albums from vacations we had taken before Mom got sick, and pictures from Tom's high school graduation. As I flipped through the smiling faces in those pictures, I couldn't reconcile them with the people who had hurt me so deeply. For the first time in years, I was making a decision for myself. I've been staying at Kelly's for about a week now, and the adjustment is strange. The first few days were tough, full of guilt and doubt. I've blocked Mom's number for now because her texts were a roller coaster of anger, guilt-tripping, and desperate pleas. Tom hasn't reached out at all. But in the quiet of Kelly's small apartment, I've started to find a sense of peace. I'm not constantly on edge, waiting for Mom to call me for help. I've even begun looking into community college classes, hoping to finally finish my degree. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm starting to live for myself. The road ahead feels uncertain and scary, but for once, it's a road I've chosen. I've started looking for a new job. Last week, I had an interview for an entry-level HR position at a local nonprofit. It went really well, and I'm cautiously hopeful that I'll receive an offer soon. The pay would be a little better than my current job, but more than that, there's room for growth. I've been stagnant for so long in my career that the idea of having opportunities ahead excites me. The work feels meaningful. Too, it aligns with my interests and the things I care about, like helping others. The nonprofit focuses on mental health and community support programs, something I've been passionate about for as long as I can remember. It feels like a step towards something better. Yet, there's still a part of me that hesitates, that doubts. It's hard to shake off the years of being stuck in the same patterns, taking care of others at the expense of my own needs. Sometimes, even though I know I've made the right decision by leaving home and putting myself first, I feel this pang of guilt gnawing at me. At night, when everything is quiet, I lie awake thinking about Mom and whether she's managing without me. Is she eating properly? Is she keeping up with her medical appointments? But then, I remind myself of how much healthier and happier I am now that I'm prioritizing my own needs. Since I moved in with Kelly, I've noticed changes in myself that I hadn't realized were even possible. There's a lightness I haven't felt in years, a sense of freedom in not having to constantly worry about someone else. I'm excited to see where this new chapter of my life takes me. For the first time in years, I feel like I have real options and opportunities ahead of me. I've even started rediscovering old passions and exploring new ones. Last weekend, Kelly and I went hiking. It's something I used to love but hadn't done in years because I never had the time or energy. The fresh air, the towering trees, and the simple joy of being outdoors reminded me of a version of myself I thought I had lost. I had forgotten how much peace I could find in nature, how good it felt to just be in the moment, without the weight of my responsibilities dragging me down. Of course, there are still hard days. Untangling years of codependency and rebuilding my life won't happen overnight. Some days, I feel overwhelmed by the enormity of it all starting over, figuring out who I am outside of being the caretaker. But I'm committed to the process, no matter how challenging it might be. I'm learning to trust myself and my decisions, even when they're difficult. Thank you all again for your support and advice. It truly made a difference in giving me the courage to make these changes. I'll update again if there are any significant developments. But for now, I'm taking things one day at a time, one step closer to the life I've always deserved. Update 3. Hi everyone. I wanted to give one final update on my situation. It's been about 3 months since I moved out, and a lot has changed in that time, most of it for the better. The biggest news is that I got the job at the nonprofit. I've been working there for about a month now, and I absolutely love it. The work is challenging but incredibly rewarding. I feel like I'm finally doing something that matters, something that aligns with my values and interests. We're working on programs to support underprivileged youth in the community, and every day, I'm reminded of how much of a difference we can make in people's lives. It's also amazing to be in a positive work environment for once, where my contributions are valued and appreciated. My coworkers are supportive and kind, and I'm finally in a space where I feel like I belong. For so long, I was just going through the motions at my old jobs, never feeling fulfilled or recognized. Now, I wake up excited to go to work, knowing that I'm part of something meaningful. In addition to work, I'm still taking classes at the community college, and I'm doing well there too. I'm on track to finish my associate degree by next year, and after that, I'm planning to transfer to a 4-year university to complete my bachelor's in psychology. It's been challenging balancing work and school, but I'm motivated in a way I haven't been in years. I feel like I'm finally back on the path I was meant to be on before everything got derailed. Living with Kelly has been wonderful. We've become even closer over these past few months, and her support has been invaluable. She's been encouraging me to get out more and socialize, something I had almost forgotten how to do. Last week, we went to a local meetup group for young professionals, and I met some really nice people. It felt good to be out, making connections, and remembering how to have fun without feeling guilty or overwhelmed by responsibilities. I'm slowly rebuilding my social life and rediscovering what it means to live for myself, not for someone else. As for my family, things are still complicated. Mom has finally stopped trying to contact me directly, but she's been spreading a lot of negativity about me to other family members and mutual friends. It hurts more than I want to admit. Some days, it feels like a fresh wound every time I hear about something new she's said, but I'm trying not to let it get to me. My therapist has been helping me work through these feelings and teaching me how to maintain my boundaries. I've realized that I can care about my family without sacrificing my own well-being. Tom graduated and moved across the country for his new jobs. He sent me a brief text before he left, saying he hoped I would get my act together while he was gone. I didn't respond. Part of me is sad about how distant we've become. I miss the bond we had when we were kids, but I'm also starting to accept him for who he is now, not who I wish he would be. Maybe one day we'll find common ground again, but for now, I'm focusing on the people who support me. One bright spot has been my growing relationship with Aunt Rachel. She's been checking in on me regularly, and we've developed a really close bond. She's become a source of support I never expected, and she's told me how proud she is of me for standing up for myself. Last week, Aunt Rachel invited me over for dinner, and when I got there, I was surprised to see Mom was there too. Apparently, Aunt Rachel had arranged it, hoping we could talk things out. At first, I almost turned around and left. The tension in the room was palpable, and for a moment, all those old feelings of guilt and obligation came rushing back. But I decided to stay and hear them out. Mom looked older and more tired than I remembered. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if I had caused her pain by leaving. But I reminded myself that I had left for a reason. The dinner started off awkward, but as the evening went on, something unexpected happened. Mom started to open up. She admitted that she had taken me for granted all those years, and that she was scared of losing me completely. She told me she's been going to therapy, trying to work on her issues. It was a small moment of vulnerability, but it felt significant. We're still not in a great place, but it felt like a tiny step in the right direction. I told Mom that I still needed more time and space, but that maybe we could start having short, supervised visits with Aunt Rachel present. Mom agreed, though she looked sad about it. I'm still maintaining firm boundaries, but I feel less angry than I did before. I'm focusing on healing and building the life I want for myself, and that's what matters most. For the first time in years, I'm excited about the future. I'm learning to put myself first without feeling selfish about it. There are still challenges ahead, and I know I'll have to keep working on how to balance my own needs with caring for others in a healthy way. But I'm learning to forgive my family without letting them take advantage of me again. It's a process, and there will be good days and bad days. But overall, I feel like I'm finally on the right path. I'm proud of myself for having the courage to make these changes, even though they were incredibly difficult. I hope my story can help others who might be in similar situations. Remember that it's never too late to start prioritizing your own happiness and well-being.